Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Virginia State University Board of Visitors electronic meeting for June 12th, 2020. At this time, I would like to have a calling of the roll. Let's change the agenda just a bit. We'll call the roll and then an invocation by Mr. Rodney Hall.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Very, very good. All right. I shall call the roll. Mr. Winston.
Here.
Dr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Crittenden here. Ms. Corey. Ms. Corey.
Here.
Thank you. Let's see. Dr. Dance. Mr. Fleming. Mr. Hill.
Present.
Mr. Herrera. Ms. Hunter. Mr. Richardson. I know he's on his way. Mr. Sessoms.
Present.
Mr. Stegmeyer.
Here.
Mr. Turnage. Mr. Worley. Mr. Worley.
He's here. I'm not sure where he went, but he's been on since almost.
I see him. I see him. Dr. Spencer. She's here. And Mr. Gray. Thank you.
This is Xavier. I'm here. I didn't understand you when you called out my name. Can you?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Hall, would you lead us in an invocation?
Yes. Heavenly Father, thank you on behalf of all who have gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for provision, and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and the honor of being appreciative of our responsibilities. In our hearts, we plan our course, but we pray that you establish our steps. I pray that we seek you for advice. Show us how to get from where we are to where we need to be. Please guide us, Lord. We place this meeting in your hands. We place our hearts and our minds in your hands so that you may direct us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda as revised.
So moved from Pam Curry.
Is there a second?
Second, Valerie.
Thank you. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of approval of the agenda say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. In the board book, there was the minutes from our previous meeting, our May 21st meeting. I'll accept the motion for approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me now?
Yes, Mr. Worley.
I apologize. I was trying to have to redial in because you couldn't hear me, so I redialed in. Are we about to approve the minutes?
Yes, sir.
I don't know whether I'm supposed to register my comments now or after you having a second on the motion.
Okay. Was there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Pam.
A second?
Xavier. I second it.
Davey. Questions? Mr. Worley?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the diligent on page 8, it referred to approval of the budget is granted with the understanding that the committee will meet regularly throughout the fall. I believe I made that comment, and it was to be the budget was granted on the approval, was approved subject to there being a monthly meeting through January, I believe I said January 2021. I believe you accepted that recommendation. You accepted that recommendation on page 10 of the minutes, where you say the rector accepted the recommendation that the finance committee meet monthly with the finance and CFO and team. But it didn't say the finance committee was to meet, so I was a little confused. The intent of the motion, or my comment was that the finance committee would meet monthly through January to review the budget because of the changing conditions that we would be facing. Is that what's reflected in the minutes?
That was the intent. That was my understanding as well, Mr. Worley.
Okay, well, it's probably not worded that way.
Okay. And what was the contradiction?
The first part on page 8, it says that the budget is granted with the understanding that the committee will meet regularly, not monthly, regularly throughout the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Comment was that we will meet monthly through January 2021.
Right. So the change is from regularly to monthly?
Yes, and through January 2021.
Okay. I think I think that the resolution had the language of monthly through January 2021. The minutes reflect just something a little different, but the resolution, as I recall, is monthly through January 2021. But that's noted, and we'll modify the minutes accordingly.
Mr. Chairman, there was one other another comment. I would like to have in the minutes where it was discussed about the major risks, that it was in the internal audit section, and we talked about the major risks. I think the auditor indicated that for the accounts receivable, there was $11 million risk. That was not identified in the minutes. And also on the NIFA, that the auditor referenced $8.3 million. So I would like that included in the appropriate place for during the audit. That's part of the minutes that references the auditor's presentation.
So, auditor's presentation. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, there's one other, this is my final comment. There are a number of things that were worded in the minutes that I think they were very artfully worded, and I didn't quite agree with or understand that. So rather than trying to go through each one of those to identify those issues, I would recommend and ask for your acceptance that the transcript or recordings of the minutes not be destroyed upon approval of these minutes, so that we can have that material for later reference if needed.
Greg, your phone transmission went out. Say that again, please.
Oh, wow. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I mean it was just a clip out. I hear you.
And
Oh, okay.
Mr. Rector and Board, I have to inform you that the link that's being simulcast is not working. And if it's not working, we're going to have a problem with this being a valid virtual meeting. So can we get someone on IT on getting the link back up? At this point, I would recommend that you guys not have any further discussion until we can confirm that the link is operating appropriately.
Ramona, it's Hubie. I'm actually watching the live stream and everything is working. So I'm not sure where you're watching it from.
No, I'm actually getting it from other people who are outside of the university telling me it's not working.
I can't see it either.
Okay. Are you looking at it from the VSU live events?
I don't know where they're looking at it from. I just got a call that it's not working.
We
So, hold
followed
on.
the instructions and I don't see anything virtual. I see names, but I don't see any faces. And it doesn't allow me to do the video.
Okay.
Where are you looking?
So I'm cutting on
Hold on, I'm going to
my
find out
camera to show that the live stream is actually broadcasting.
Okay, what did you say, Bonner?
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
this is Zoe Spencer. I'm also getting emails from people who are trying to access the link from the announcement, and they're saying that the link that is posted on the announcement is not working, and they're asking for an alternative link.
And they're saying that it says page cannot be found.
Okay. Again, if everyone could go to vsu.edu, and in the middle of the page, it's live events. Click there and you will see the broadcast for this event. It is streaming on live stream currently, right now.
Is that the link that was put in the legal notice?
I don't know, but I know that I'm watching it right now.
Okay. Well, there's a problem if that's not the link that was put in the legal notice. So I think because of technology, if we give them the proper link to tie into, we may be able to cure the issue on the link not being the right link for them to watch on the outside. So is it a way to communicate that? I mean, you telling me is fine because I'm listening on the phone, but for them, we need to be able to communicate to them what the actual link is. Can you give us a link to send to them versus staff?
Yes, I will post it in the chat, and then you can distribute it to whoever. But it is always available. All of our live stream events are available on the website.
Well, because the notice had a different link than what we're talking about, or could have possibly had that, we need to make sure this link is out before we proceed, so we're in compliance with the virtual meeting rules.
Give me 1 second.
Thank you.
Can you change the link? Can you change the link that's on the legal notice?
The legal notice is supposed to give them prior notice of the meeting. That's a problem. We can make the argument that technology dictated. You technically are not supposed to change the link. So I don't know what link was given because I was given a different notice. If it's something that went out in the newspaper or was posted on the website, we potentially could. While y'all are dealing with the link, I've got to look for an answer to see if we can even continue. Hold on, please.
Mr. Harris, this is Jay. Can you hear me?
I can.
So you said to try vsu.edu.
Yes, I just put it in the chat.
Okay, well, I did try that link just out of curiosity to see if it would work, and I am getting a message that the site is too long to respond and we cannot reach this page.
Okay. I don't know how to demonstrate that it is working other than
I am speaking with a webmaster right now who is ensuring that the link that is in the announcement is the correct one. Okay, so give us a few minutes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ed.
Okay, and for those that are in the site, if you could click on the link that's in the chat window, that will launch it. But I am watching it as well online right now.
Okay, so those persons, Ramona and Mr. Stegmeyer, please ask those and Dr. Spencer, please ask those persons to try again. I just spoke with the webmaster. It has been refreshed.
My person just said it's working now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ed. Now that the technical issues are cured, I think you can proceed.
Thank you. So, Mr. Worley, the third modification to the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, it was not necessarily a modification. I said because some of there were a number of things that I felt were artfully that I'm not certain that I necessarily agreed with, or that was my recollection. So I was asking that the recording and or transcript from our prior meeting not be retained even after we have approved the minutes. That was a request.
Okay. So the first modification was the amendment from regular to monthly in the minutes, and the addition of the auditor's comments of the NIFA risk and the account receivable risk.
Yes, sir. 11 million for the receivable and 8.3. I note say for the NIFA.
Okay.
And you can verify that off the transcript.
I think yes, that's what we'll do. We'll make the modification as they were presented. So so is there a motion to accept the minutes as modified as suggested by Mr. Worley?
So moved, Pam.
Is there a second?
Second, this is Greg.
Thank you. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Those that oppose. Madam Secretary, take the roll.
Mr. Winstead,
Yes.
Dr. Brown,
Yes.
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 Okay. Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Hunter,
Yes.
Mr. Richardson. Mr. Richardson. I'm not hearing you. Okay. Mr. Sessoms.
Yes.
Mr. Stegmeyer.
Yes.
Mr. Turnage.
Yes.
Mr. Whirley.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I just have a few remarks as we get started. I want to thank you all for joining this emergency meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to receive an update on the opening of the fall semester. So we'll hear from the president and senior staff as we move through the discussion. Secondly, on May 25th, we witnessed the 8-minute and 46-second murder of a restrained African-American citizen, Mr. George Perry Floyd Jr., by a uniformed police officer. This event has ignited a fire that is transforming race relations, the nation's landscape, and the world. Just to state that this board stands in support of our president, President Abdullah, and his leadership and statements through this transformation. And personally, my firm and my colleagues are in dialogue and discussion with our clients and stakeholders as we navigate through this new reality, and we do it together. To the board members, I would urge that each of you do the same in your respective stations. And if those conversations are not being initiated, then that you consider initiating those conversations. At this time, though, I'd like to take a moment of silence for Mr. George Perry Floyd Jr. And Ms. Breonna Taylor. Thank you. The second comment that I have is that each of you received an announcement that the governor has made appointments to the VSU Board of Visitors. And we have returning for their second terms, Ms. Pam Curry and Mr. James Stegmeyer. Welcome back. We have three new board members, a dynamic group of new board members, and Ms. Christine M. Darden out of Hampton, Virginia, retired researcher and senior staff at NASA. Ms. Siobhan Gordon, Vice President of Diversity, Recruitment, and Talent Acquisition at Capital One. And Mr. Bill Murray, Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Dominion Energy. So we welcome our three new board members. And as we stated in our May 21st meeting, we want to thank our board members, Ms. Jennifer Hunter, and Dr. Darrell Dance for their 2 terms of service. We thank you for your gifts, your talents, and your treasure, and wish you Godspeed in your future endeavors. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Abdullah.
Thank you very much, sir. With your permission, I'd like to first echo your last comments, welcoming our board members back who have had their terms renewed, and of course, again, wishing those who are now maybe serving in their last meeting that we appreciate the work that they've done. I would also like to echo your first comments. While the university has been deeply touched by the movements and the protests that center on the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but not necessarily just that, we have been impacted at Virginia State University. So many of our faculty and students are actively engaged and involved in trying to create a better world, and we are proud of them, and we support all of them. And I think that it continues to echo that Virginia State University is a place of hope, and it is a place of change, and it is very important. It is as important today as it was in 1882. And so with that, we want to make sure that we continue to move forward and are able to provide the full HBCU, the full Virginia State University experience. And we remain very hopeful that we will be back to regular in the spring semester. We want everyone to be back and to be a part of what happens here at Virginia State University. But having said that, we do know that the COVID-19 is still here. And so we are developing plans to reopen in the fall that mirror the challenges that we have in our day. We're trying to open in a way that mitigates our risk and liability while understanding, of course, that that there will always be risk as it relates to this public health crisis and therefore liability concerns. We also want to make sure that we temper expectations and that we work with our entire campus community as we begin to learn the best ways to, as an HBCU culture, Virginia State University culture that has depended so much on proximity, which was something that will be limited in the fall, to be patient with us as we learn better how to impose our culture in this new world. And so we are excited to present these plans. There are approximately 7 or 8 slides, and there are about 5 presenters. So there's no more than 2 slides per presenter. We highly encourage for people to ask questions in the middle of the presentation. Most of our presenters only have 1 slide. We have included on the slide not just the work, but also the budget implications of all of the different proposals. And then Mr. Davenport, who will come in last, will kind of discuss what that means for Virginia State University. And so with that, first, I'll start with a couple of slides. The governor presented yesterday Virginia's plan to reopen higher education. Next slide, please. Virginia's plans to open higher education, and he essentially concentrated on 4 points. That there's 4 necessary conditions. One of them that is controlled by us, and 3, of course, that are outside of our realm of possibility. The first one is positive trends in public data. Second is surge healthcare capacity. The third is climate adherence to sound public health principles. And then the last one is the campus preparedness plan that they announced yesterday that will be due, that we will be turning in plans. I have a meeting next Wednesday to discuss what those plans need to look like in detail, but we will turn those plans into SHEV and make sure that those are available to you. It's important to note that everything is moving and changing, and so the plan that we present today is based on our best case and our most, the knowledge that we have today. We understand that could certainly change either way. If social distancing requirements are lessened towards the end of August, that would of course mean that the work that we do, we wouldn't have to maintain the level of distance that we're proposing in this presentation. But also, if because of trends in public data that the governor moves to quarantine Virginia, that could also have a great impact on this plan. So it's important to note that this plan is a working document and will continue to be worked on as we move forward. Next slide. So items needed in the plan. There's 4 specific areas that we need to address for the plan for the Commonwealth. That is the repopulation of campus, the monitoring of health conditions to detect infection, containment to prevent spread, and shutdown considerations if we need to shut down. So basically, opening campus, understanding what level of risk we have and where people are with health, how to contain it, and then of course how to shut down. As we continue to move, so this completes my part of the presentation. Up next will be Nurse Johnson Oliver, who will talk very specifically about what she needs in order to move forward. If there's a question, I'm open for any questions. Nurse Johnson Oliver.
Thank you, President Abdullah. Good morning. Student health and wellness continues to prioritize the health and safety for the campus community. With additional staffing, we will be able to triage patients, provide routine care, and facilitate screening and testing for COVID-19. Student health and wellness will continue to collaborate with residential life to provide safe and confidential housing for a positive COVID-19 student. We have an established partnership with the Virginia Department of Health in regards to contact tracing and Southside Regional Medical Center should a student decompensate and need a higher level of care. The Commonwealth of Virginia has secured the contract with LabCorp to provide FDA-approved COVID-19 testing. We have been in close contact with our LabCorp representative regarding specimen collection, procedures, and other resources. Students will self-isolate until results are confirmed, typically within 72 hours. Student Health and Wellness Medical Director is providing guidance and is aware and abreast of the university's planning for fall 2020. Our team is working to develop safe daily clinic workflows in order to continue to care for and educate our students in the climate of the new normal. We are awaiting a formula from the Virginia Department of Health and the Virginia Colleges and University medical directors on how to define an outbreak in order to change to remote instruction. The proposed budget are estimates of the clinic's anticipated needs. The additional staffing for the normal clinic operations can fluctuate based on acuity of appointments and the student population's needs. We will carefully monitor COVID-19 and the seasonal influenza statistics. We are awaiting the Commonwealth's policies and procedures regarding the university's liability with after-hours care for COVID-19 positive students. Based on best practice, testing will be allocated for symptomatic and positive exposure to a COVID-19 contact. Again, we are awaiting guidance from the Commonwealth. The miscellaneous expenses include over-the-counter medications, treatments, and daily in-demand clinic supplies. Thank you. And are there any questions?
Yes, I have a question, and that is, how many students is all of this based on?
So this is based on 1,700 students.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
$1,700 students on campus.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good morning. Is this only the medical side, or is this also taking into consideration our mental health counseling center?
Can you give me a little bit more, Dr. Spencer? I'm sorry.
I'm just asking, is this just strictly the health center itself, or are these numbers and this additional staffing including our counseling center staffing?
This is for the Student Health Center. This would be a medical assistant, a registered nurse, and a nurse practitioner or physician assistant, just depending on the contract pool. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Jennifer. Should we hold all budget questions until the end?
I think so. But if there's something specific about this piece, then it's okay to bring it up.
Okay.
But if it's budget, the universal budget, then yes, we can hold it until Mr. Davenport.
Thank you.
Director Winstead, I have one more question, please.
Yes, Dr.
Thank you. Is there a contact tracing plan? Do we have a contact tracing plan in place, or are we in development?
Yes, Dr. Spencer. So we are in development. We do have technology with our IT department to do contact tracing, and we are also working very closely with our local health department. As you've probably seen on TV, they are hiring over 1,000 contact tracers. As of yesterday, they are in training, so we will have access to a contact tracer specifically assigned to VSU and the community. So with, yes, ma'am. So with any positive case, that is a reportable result to the health department.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So thank you all. If there are no further questions, I would like to present the next presenter. So next is Ms. Jane Harris. She is the AVP of Facilities and Capital Outlay, and she will be discussing reopening plans for facilities. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you for talking with us this morning.
I'd like to talk a little bit about our facilities plan for reopening campus. Our plan will focus on social distancing measures, enhanced cleaning, personal protective equipment or PPE, and supplies. All buildings will be de-densified to conform to social distancing protocols. All social distancing protocols will be adhered to the extent possible, including maintaining a safe distance apart, usually 6 feet, and maintaining the practice of good personal hygiene, self-monitoring of symptoms, hand washing, etc. This will require the purchase and installation of campus-wide signage to delineate safe spaces, hygiene precautions, and traffic control in common areas such as elevators, corridors, and stairwells. Assembly areas will be restricted such that informal gatherings that don't follow social distancing protocols are not possible. We'll install high-volume hand sanitizer stations at entrances and high-touch areas. Because the classrooms will be de-densified to conform to social distancing protocols, the available classroom seats will be reduced to 35 to 50% of their existing capacity. Therefore, we'll be equipping approximately 35,000 assignable square feet of non-traditional spaces, such as the banquet rooms at our dining halls, and these spaces will be needed for instruction. To contain the spread, each classroom will be equipped with hand sanitizer stations and disinfectant wipes dispensers. This will allow students and faculty to clean as they go by wiping down the desk and workspaces before and after each use. Additional measures in classrooms will include providing sneeze guards at instructor desks and podiums. Custodians will perform enhanced cleaning twice per day in the instructional spaces in accordance with the class schedules. We anticipate professionally cleaning and disinfecting classrooms at midday and at the end of the instructional day so that they're prepared for morning classes. All horizontal and vertical surfaces, especially high-touch areas, will be wiped and disinfected continuously throughout the day using products approved by the CDC. Our residence halls will be equipped with only one student per room. The historic residence halls with community bathrooms will assign times for their usage so that there aren't surges in usage that do not conform to social distancing protocols. Our common areas such as lobbies, laundry facilities, and community restrooms will be equipped with hand sanitizer stations and disinfectant wipes dispensers for clean as you go after each use. All students will receive a welcome back kit that contains a cloth mask or gaiter, disposable mask, gloves, hand sanitizer, and a safe touch tool that allows students to open doors and push buttons without touching. Custodians will perform enhanced cleaning twice per day in the common areas and once per day in staff offices. High-touch areas such as shared restrooms, elevators, corridors, laundry rooms, and vending machines will be wiped and disinfected continuously throughout the day using products approved by the CDC. The Student Health Clinic and Counseling Center at Memorial Hall will require not only enhanced cleaning and disinfecting services, but also custodians that provide continuous cleaning of exam rooms and counseling spaces while medical staff attends to patients. These are dedicated cleaners that will stay in that area throughout the day. We expect these social distancing measures, the enhanced cleaning protocols, personal protective equipment, and supplies will result in an annual cost of $2 million. We expect to offset some of these costs by continuing to work from home for many departments. Employees needed for the success of in-person instruction and those performing essential functions will return to campus. This would allow VSU to better manage the necessary cleaning and safety supply costs, plus we can institute energy management measures in those unoccupied spaces. In addition, some of our facilities resources will be reallocated to provide the additional cleaning and disinfecting. So with that, if there are any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Palm, Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Student Success and Engagement.
Mr. Chairman, this is Greg Worley. I raised my electronic hand.
Okay.
Sorry.
I do have a question. Ms.
Yes.
Harris, on
Go ahead,
Ms. Harris, on the $2 million cost, you referenced that there will be in the residence, there will be single rooms. Does that $2 million in cost, does that reflect any potential loss of revenue related to not being able to house as many students on campus, or will that number be in a different presentation?
That number will be in a different presentation. This is just the expense side.
One final question, and maybe this should have been asked on the other slide, and maybe I just missed it. Will there be any monitoring of temperatures as people come into these different classrooms or buildings?
I'm going to defer to Dr. Johnson Oliver for that one.
Sure, yes, sir. So we're going to be asking that students be accountable and do a self-check. There is a self-check on the CDC website of their symptoms. The recommendation and best practice is at this time is to not take temperatures with respect to HIPAA. Students may be on medications that can definitely increase their temp, or have medical conditions where they have a low threshold and may have a underlying condition that their temperature may be a low grade temperature or low grade fever. So with respect to HIPAA, we will not be taking temperatures with the, I believe people are now using the infrared contactless devices. So the recommendation is that we not.
So I'm sorry, so you will not be using even the infrared devices?
We will be using them in the student health center. The RAs in the residence hall will have them in case of an emergency, but the recommendation is to not take temperatures as people enter classrooms or meetings, etc.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Worley.
Ms. Director, this is Jennifer. I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Hunter.
A comment. On the PPE, I know one of the masks in particular, I know one of the things that has come up is concerns, especially in the Black community, about having a mask. I was recently made aware that there are clear masks that are available. Our sales organization is going to actually produce those for some of our diverse sales representatives that are out in the field, and we're concerned about their safety. So I just want to share that, if that's something that procurement perspective you want to look into, so that is one barrier to wearing a mask. It is more expensive, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware.
Mr. Director? Mr. Director, if I could?
President. Yep.
Yes, I wanted to take this opportunity to say that we're especially sensitive to how we police, if you will, social distancing and mandatory mask wearing as it is mandated by the governor. And so one of the things that'll be particularly important at Virginia State is we will not be using security and police to deal with social distancing and mask wearing challenges. And so we don't have our plan yet of what we will do. But one of the things that I want to make sure is that we're not turning that into exacerbating the problems that we already have in our world. So we are sensitive to that. And we are thinking about that. And thank you for bringing that up because I think that could really help us move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. If there are no other questions, Dr. Paul.
Can't hear you, Doc. If you're talking, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Hear you.
Can everybody hear me? Yes. Thank you so much. Good morning, Mr. Rector and the Board of Visitors. Something I want to talk to you about right now is really dealing with student housing. Just in general, before COVID or pre-COVID, Virginia State University has a maximum occupancy limit of about 2,800 seats or rooms or what have you, approximately 2,800. What we did was, we took an inventory of student housing with the intention of adhering to social distancing and guidelines and provide a safe environment for our students and residents. And we've identified a maximum of about 1,740. That is the number that Ms. Johnson Oliver as well as Ms. Harris have been talking about with regards to our occupancy on campus. What I would tell you is that there's a few challenges with this, and I think Ms. Harris also talked a little bit about it. One of them is that we have community bathrooms, which are actually listed on the top above the actual dark line, all except whiting, and I'll tell you about whiting in a second. These particular residence halls have community bathrooms, which again, we're going to have to reduce the number of students on the floor. The number you see at half occupancy are the number of students that we will have on the floor. That's far to your right column. We also are going to have to schedule usage of bathrooms for those residents in those particular dorms and on those particular floors. And also we're going to have multiple cleanings throughout the day for those particular bathrooms and for the community used bathrooms. One thing I want to talk about is also whiting, in which we're going to leverage whiting on the third floor as a quarantine space for students who may need to be quarantined with regards to symptoms of COVID-19. In addition, we're going to look at probably about $140,000 in training our students and staff and educating those particular students with regards to COVID-19 best practices, safe, and being basically clean with regards to making sure that we're not spreading of that particular virus and those different things aren't happening. And again, we're looking at making sure that our staff are also trained, the housing staff, to also be able to make sure that they are aware of all the various best practices when dealing with COVID-19. And so again, we're looking at about 1,740 for our student and resident housing. And of course, some of the challenges, of course, are in some of those community bathrooms in which we are going to have to do scheduled cleanings, as well as students are going to have to schedule to use those particular bathrooms to make sure that we are making sure that we're practicing social distancing and safe practices. Are there any questions with regards to the student housing in general? And again, I want to thank, again, the task force for these particular reports that we basically took the recommendations from the task force, including Jane Harris's, as well as Nurse Johnson Oliver. And the next slide is actually going to be dealing with instruction. And of course, many of the recommendations coming from our academic task force were actually incorporated into how we're going to open up in the fall. So just in general, we are going to have an on-time start, August 17th, 2020. We will have a reduced campus community, as we discussed earlier in the slides before and previous, this particular slide, about 1,740 number of students on campus at least. As far as instruction goes, we're looking at a split population to really achieve instruction for all of our students. We're looking at, of course, an on-site as well as online and remote instruction. So again, the on-site will be with those students, that 1,740 that we're looking at. And we're looking at really introducing a hybrid instruction model. That hybrid instruction model would be for students that may be of a class of 50. 25 of those students would probably meet face-to-face on one day, while the other 25 students would be maybe in their dorm room with a remote synchronous platform. And then on Wednesday, those students would split and go back and forth with one another. And of course, we're looking at online remote instruction for the rest of the student body that will not be able to be here on campus. What I would tell you is that we have a number of challenges with that. Of course, we understand that we're going to have to increase the number of adjuncts that assist us with some of the particular increase in splitting of the classes. We're also going to have to really make sure that all of our faculty are trained with and really go through faculty development with online instruction. And so that additional cost that you see is a 2.2 million annual cost includes faculty overloads, adjuncts, as well as online training for our faculty. It is my intention to have all of our faculty trained to teach online as we move forward. A lot of progress is being made this summer with about 60 faculty right now being trained. But throughout the fall and spring, we would like to make sure we reach a maximum number of our faculty being trained. That particular cost is also will be offset with looking at Title III money and other types of funding to really address that. We're also looking at block scheduling.
Dr. Just
yes.
one. I think we have a question, if not two, Dr. Spencer and Ms. Hunter.
Sure.
My question, Dr. Palm, went back to the last slide, and that was, you said that you were reserving the third floor of Whiting for COVID quarantine. Are there still going to be students on the first and second floors of Whiting? And what is the implication, like what is the medical implication of that, of not isolating the people who may test positive from the rest of the healthy campus community? And then my second question is, I need for you, if you could, to better explain that split population and like what that looks like on campus, off campus.
Okay. Yes, and what I'm going to do is defer to Nurse Christie with regards to the quarantine piece of
Sure.
it.
Yeah, sure, Dr. Palm. Hey, Dr. Spencer. So it's going to be dependent again on contact tracing. If there are 2 students on a floor that are COVID-19 positive, we will probably quarantine everybody where they are in their assigned room. It just depends on contact tracing the situation, but we also needed a backup plan if this is an isolated event that we quarantine that particular student in Whiting Hall.
Okay.
Dr. Spencer, there was a second part to your question?
Yes, my second, the second part of the question was, Dr. Palm, when you were talking about split population for the students who are not on campus, the hybrid, can you explain what that looks like more thoroughly, please?
Yeah, so for example, if we have, when we talk about a split population, we can, we're looking at approximately 740 students being on campus. We have approximately 3,500 to 4,000 students. Well, the rest of the students have to receive instruction. Those students who will not be on campus will receive remote or online instruction for those particular majors or what have you. When we talk about face-to-face or online or actually on-site, in some cases, and whenever we can, if we can set up the technology, and again, this is all fluid right now, but we want to make sure we set up the technology with synchronous instruction, where we may have a faculty member or a class that has 50 students in that particular class. As Jane has gone through and did an inventory on the spacing of all the classrooms, in some cases, that classroom will only be able to fit 15 to 25 students of that 50 student limit. Well, those 50 students, the 25 students who will not be on Monday, who will not be in class face to face, can be back in their dorm room on their computer receiving the same instruction at the same time that those other students are receiving it. And then on Wednesday, they'll flip, where on Wednesday, those students who were in the dorm room, they'll be in class now with the faculty member. And so that right now, we are working through that as we speak. Again, we do not have all the answers, but that is the intention as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hunter, did you have a question?
I didn't. That was, I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Richardson, you're recognized.
Can you hear me now?
We have you, sir.
Yes.
Okay. I finally found the speaker, but I was just wanting to get back to something mentioned earlier about not taking students' temperatures. It seems to be something that's widespread with employees taking it, particularly if it's widespread occurrence. Will we reconsider that if we find that there are incidents of COVID-19 on campus? Because it seems to be something that's widespread in a lot of organizations. And I understand the reluctance, but apparently in this COVID-19 environment, they are relaxing some of the laws and rulings. And what I understand is that if you do it privately, and if there's cause to believe that there is some widespread occurrence of it, you can. I was just wondering if we're going to reconsider it if we find ourselves in that situation.
Yes, sir. So we are staying abreast of the CDC and Virginia Department of Health and the Colleges and Universities Medical Association. So we are keeping abreast of the changes. We also in student health have the thermometers that we give to students, especially during flu season, so they can monitor their temperatures. However, we also know that you can be totally asymptomatic and be a carrier of the virus. We're just being mindful because we would hate for a student to be asked not to attend class and they may have an underlying medical condition, and respecting HIPAA and their privacy. So yes, sir, we will definitely stay abreast of that and any changes we can implement with student health.
And the other question is, thank you for that answer. And the other
Yes, sir.
relative to PPE, I love the plan. And then you may have said it, but I've been having technical difficulties over here. Are we ordering the supplies we need in advance, or even now, because there are severe shortages of PPE, and as a result, some of it's non-existent, and others become extremely expensive. I was wondering if we've already begun to order some of these things in advance.
Yes, sir. So I can speak to student health, and Ms. Harris can definitely chime in. Our PPE was delivered last week, that we are going to stockpile our inventory, and we will be taking inventory actually on Tuesday. So our PPE for student health has been delivered. Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess.
Hi,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Jane Harris. Kevin asked for me, for my area to see to that for the entire campus. We sent a order form, if you will, some time ago to all of the different departments, and we are getting that PPE in all the time. So yes, in fact, my office, our conference room, everyone's office in my building is full of PPE right now.
Very good.
Yeah, and we haven't heard from everyone. We assume that we'll just continue to order now that we're a little clearer on reopening.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Richardson?
Yes. How do I get my hand down, because I don't want it to it's stuck. So
I'll call that a permanent fixture. I won't react to it.
Okay. Thank you.
The chair, I will recognize Mr. Worley. Going once, going twice.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Turnage.
I just wanted to follow up on something that Mr. Richardson said. I know we are doing mass temperature screenings for employees, in district government. And we do this under the understanding that HIPAA restrictions don't apply to that information. To that activity. I'm not sure if the same license is given to a university, but clearly we've looked at the HIPAA law, and our lawyers have determined that it generally should not apply to scenarios where an entity, an employer, is taking vital signs or using other hands-on screening methods to ensure the safety of its workforce. Now, again, we are an employer, and I'm not sure how the relationship between university and student would be described. But I think it would be if the opportunity is there to do it, I think it would be unwise if the university did not have something in place that allowed them to spot checks on temperatures.
Got it.
Mr. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Hang on, Charlie. I've got one before you. Dr. Brown.
Thank you. My question is back to the 1740 students on campus. Is that substantially lower than what our normal student population on campus is? And if that is the case, how are we determining the 1740 that will be on campus? I mean, is it a first come, first serve? I mean, how are we making that distinction?
So I'll take a stab at that as well. Thank you, Visitor Brown. So first of all, it's still up in the air with regards to how we're going to determine what students will be on campus. So we have a lot of work to do. Again, this is somewhat fluid. But just in general, our maximum occupancy is about 2,800 as far as living on campus, but also we have about 400 over at Ettrick as well, the university apartments at Ettrick as well. So again, it's a robust population that is on campus. So that is significantly reduced from what we usually have on campus. That 1740, determine that 1740, again, we are working through that now as we go through this exercise, and we'll identify and determine how that will actually play out.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Mr. Hill.
Yes, Mr. Director, I too have a concern about not taking the temperature. It falls more neatly under this fiduciary responsibility, and I understand the rationale for not doing it. The flip side, though, is unless the governor's office or Chev or someone else has made it clear that we should not, or we're okay not to do it, my suggestion is to get some protection for the university if we go forward without taking temperatures, to be sure that we don't walk into something that we wish we would have taken the appropriate action. As you know, we're somewhat here in my household involved with real live healthcare, and we have to be responsible for our employees as well as guests, as well as patients. And one of the things that has been very clear to us is that we are better served and the patients are better served and the visitors are better served by us taking the temperature. So I would ask, in the spirit of Mr. Richardson's comment, Mr. Turner's comment, I would ask that we go back and we look at that issue very closely. And if we choose to follow the path described, then please make sure that the governor's office and Chev all okay with that, and that and make sure our attorneys are aware of that so that we can protect the university, in addition to protect the other students who come into contact with folk who may be asymptomatic.
Thank you, Charlie.
So,
Palm.
Mr. Chairman, this is Greg Worley. I had some phone problems again.
Okay.
When you called. My question was for Dr. Palm and the 1,740 students on campus. I'm just trying to make certain that I understand this correctly. Well, they're the students who are housed on campus are the only ones who can attend face-to-face classes. Is that correct?
Mr. Worley, we're actually taking a look at that as well. We know that there are students that are off campus that live close in the surrounding areas. We're trying to take a look on how we will monitor those students as they come on campus, and it has guests come on campus to make sure that you know, that they're not impacting our students as well. But also will depend on also the population of students that we have on campus, whether or not what type of instruction we would be giving them. For example, if we have only seniors on campus, you know, those freshmen or sophomores or juniors may not need to be on campus at that time. So we're working through all those different scenarios as we speak right now to make sure that we first of all provide a safe campus, but also make sure that all the students have the maximum opportunity to be on campus, as well as to receive that face-to-face instruction as they so much wish to do. We also have graduate students also to address that as well. We have graduate students as well that would live off campus as well. So we're taking a look at all those different scenarios.
And maybe this will be covered in another area, but if we are not allowing face-to-face instructions for a good portion of our students, what impact, if any, does that have on our revenue?
Right, and I think maybe Mr. Davenport will probably address that as we move forward. But again, that is going to be a very important impact on our revenue.
My next question, Dr. Palm, you talked about online teaching.
Yes.
Do we have contracts for companies to be able to do that online, or we're going to be relying upon the same instructors who may even have a heavier load because of the splitting of classes?
Right. So one of the things that we're doing, just in general, we are ramping up, of course, training our faculty, and also providing training during the fall for our faculty. What we want to do is we want to make sure that our faculty are operating at the highest capacity they can with doing online or remote instruction. So we want to use our faculty. And so the other thing is, as we're looking at the enhanced number of I guess teaching load, as we want to call it, we're looking at other opportunities to try to reduce it. Just for example, the hybrid instruction, where again a faculty member won't have to teach the class twice to one full class. And so again, looking at those opportunities to leverage our own faculty to make sure that we are not outsourcing the actual instruction itself, but we also have adjuncts that we will also use also, and we want to make sure that the adjuncts also have the training that they need in order to deliver online and remote instruction as well.
So we will not be outsourcing the instructions, but we may be bringing in more faculty.
Bringing more adjuncts in. Yeah. Bringing more adjuncts in. Yeah, we want to make sure that we leverage our faculty that we have here.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. Dr. Brown, did you have a question?
I got mine answered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Spencer.
Thank you, Rector Winstead. Dr. Palm, on the 2.2 million additional annual cost, do you have a breakdown for that? And I know that you're talking about adjuncts, and that's absolutely necessary. So do you have an actual breakdown on how much faculty, how much we can depend on, what the cost of the providing the training is going to be in that 2.2? Is there a breakdown of where that money is going to be allocated? And if that money also includes increasing our bandwidth and our infrastructure to be able to accommodate the hybrid and remote instruction. So I'm just looking at, I would like to know what that breakdown of that $2.2 billion is.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Spencer. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Dr. Spencer. So a couple things. One is that just in general, about 1.1 million is going to be, let me back up. We're looking at probably about maybe close to $500,000 with regards to the online training, what have you, for our faculty and staff. So the rest of that will actually go to the actual we'll go to adjuncts and teaching overloads for our faculty as we move forward. All right, so that's just a basic breakdown, but I can get to more detail. I can get that more detail from you offline.
Okay, last question. So, and I think Mr. Worley asked the question for the online training, and that's $500,000 for the online training, which would leave what, about 1.7 allocations for faculty. Are we going to be doing online training in-house, or are we going to be using a contractor to provide that online training?
We're going to be doing both. We are going to actually there's a company called Quality Matters. Some of the actual cost that I costed out was actually from the Quality Matters, but also we know that we have faculty in-house that can actually assist us as well. We're also looking to invest in our distance education with actually hiring instructional designers to actually help in-house to develop our online presence as well. And so we know that we have some great faculty, and we call them teaching ambassadors that we want to also, which is included in the cost, also to actually hire to help our faculty actually transition their classes on a one-on-one basis to the online platform. And so I think it's a great opportunity to actually leverage our expertise within our faculty.
When you say instructional designers, because of course for Faculty Senate, instruction and curriculum development is kind of the same thing as instructional designers. So what do you mean by instructional designers? And will that also, well, I mean, I'm not asking, but that will also run past the Senate before we engage that, correct?
Yeah, so let me just say that just in general, if you have your particular course and you have your syllabus and you have your learning outcomes, and that is your course, you can hand it to the instructional designer and they can help you place that course online for you to deliver that course. Many of our faculty do not have or really don't have that expertise to do that. That instructional designer will allow and really help the faculty member take what they do face-to-face and now take it to an online platform with making sure that that course shell or what have you has everything that they need, not taking away from the faculty freedom to deliver that course how they want to once they have it on that in that particular platform, but it'll help them transition the course to an online platform. So nothing will be taken away from the faculty's academic freedom of how they present it, but the bottom line is that they will sit down with the faculty, they'll go through it, they'll actually come to a particular consensus on how to actually present that. And again, we want to make sure that we provide that type of opportunity for our faculty to use those services in-house.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Spencer. Mr. Richardson.
Still have that same problem. I'm still trying to find out how I put my hand up in the Okay, thank you.
Any more questions there? I'll go ahead and continue.
So go ahead,
Mr.
Dr.
Chairman,
Palmer.
this is Greg Worley. I do have one other question. This plan that we have, and particularly the academic instruction plan, do we have the buy-in from all of our professors that, in terms of the plan that you're laying out, Dr. Palm?
So what I would tell you is that this actually came from our academic task force team. And what I would tell you is that for the most part, they did a great job of surveying the faculty as well as the various academic units to get the buy-in on actually providing suggestions on how to move forward with reopening for the fall. And so as we take a look at that, and then when I get to this next part, I can actually go in a little bit more detail where there's maybe we can provide some flexibility on how we do this block scheduling. But for the most part, we went through our task force to get the recommendations. And of course, the subcommittee of the task force received through their survey, the recommendations from the faculty.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Winstead, yeah.
Ms.
I guess I'm having the same issue as Mr. Richardson, but I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, for Dr. Palm. Of the students, you have 1,740 students that you're trying to determine who's going to be selected to come on campus. I was just wondering if you have a date certain when that selection process will be made, and you know, to give the students and everyone actually time to get in place to start on time.
Yeah, thank you. So you are truly recognizing some of our issues that we are dealing with, and so as we are looking at the inventory of class offerings, and also even looking at some of this next section that I'm going to go through, we will actually take a look at what would be the best and most efficient approach for us to move forward with identifying the population and the students who will be on campus. And so we do have a heavy lift with that. I am hopeful that by mid next week or in the next 2 weeks that we should have a way to actually communicate who that population will be, and what that population will look like. Because again, we do have then the challenges of making sure that the class is going to be offered on face-to-face and on-site versus online as well. And so there are a number of moving parts that we are juggling at this particular time, but I am confident that we will get to a place where we can actually communicate that to our stakeholders as far as how we're going to move forward. As you can imagine, there's going to probably be whoever doesn't get selected to come on campus will probably be pretty upset, but you know, unfortunately, we're under COVID-19 in addressing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Britton. Then Dr. Spencer.
Dr. Winstead, I just had a technical issue that I would ask that you and visitor Crittenden address. Cameron Gray, who is our new SGA president, he has taken over for Joshua Hines. He is trying to get on the line. I'm trying to get him to come on the line, and I wanted to know as one of the new appointees if he would be able to address his question and participate directly in board meeting.
So Dr. Red and Hubie, can you get Mr. Gray access?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and then I'll defer to him when he joins. He had a question, but I'll defer to him and allow him to ask his own question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. We appreciate that. Dr. Palm.
Yes,
we're on block scheduling.
Block scheduling. So again, this is another recommendation that came from our academic task force. And this block scheduling, again, just to explain it real quick, usually we have a 15-week semester. We're looking at breaking that 15-week semester up into 2 7.5-week blocks. And in doing a little research and dealing with the Department of Education, we've realized and we found that we have to offer both the 15-week semester along with the 2 7.5-week block schedule semesters at the same time in order to receive the financial aid as well. And so we're looking at running those particular, the scheduling of the fall simultaneously with 15-week semester, as well as those areas that can do 7.5 block, do those simultaneous. We are truly right now in the middle. We've sent out a survey and to get input from our chairs in various departments to actually address how we move forward into a 17.5-week block schedule instruction. And so they are taking a look at their particular classes as we speak right now. Now, one of the things that I would tell you is that it also creates some issues because many students have already pre-registered for their classes. And so especially those upperclassmen students, it may be difficult to actually move forward with a 7.5-week block scheduling or change from a 15 to 7.5 week for the upper level classes, but we're looking through that as we speak right now. And so again, it is our plan to actually have both those particular 15-week and the 2 7.5-week blocks running simultaneous. In certain majors, there may not be the opportunity to do that. We also know that we have internships. So we're really getting the input from the chairs, faculty, to really understand that piece of it. And we'll be able to make those adjustments as we move forward and looking at. One of the other reasons why we want to do the 2 7.5-week blocks is that we can maybe be able to start face-to-face in the first 7.5 week. And if there's a spike in COVID-19, it'll be an easy transition into the online and remote instruction. And so looking at that as a safety issue as well as we move forward. As we take a look at the fall, there will be no fall break. We're looking past the Thanksgiving holiday, that once Thanksgiving gets here, that we will shut the campus down and actually all finals will be done remotely. And again, just to anticipate a possible spike in the COVID-19. And so we are planning accordingly as we are actually having this meeting as well. That ends my presentation with regards to the student housing as well as academic instruction. Are there any more questions for me? And I'll entertain Mr. Cameron Gray when he comes on if he has any questions for me as well.
Great, thank you, Dr. Palm. Any other questions for Dr. Palm?
All right, well, I'm going to introduce Mr. Harris, the Chief of Staff and the CIO, and also he wears multiple other hats, and to actually bring the next part of the presentation.
Still morning. Okay. What you see in front of your screen is the president asked for us to take a look at a end user cloud computing solution. And so we did that. What you don't know is that we have fiber lines throughout the campus that runs at about 10 gigabits per second. So to fully maximize that, we're looking also to lease a 10 gigabit circuit going from our data center out to the internet. And so you have the cost for that in front of you. We also looked at deploying, the president asked that we look at a student and faculty deployment of Chromebooks to student and faculty. And you have the one-time cost of what that looks like, and then also what the recurring charges on a monthly basis would be. So the tablets it becomes the instrument in order for the student and the faculty to connect to the internet. But now we also have to have a facility to run those applications that they would normally use on campus in a classroom to be able to put that out via the internet. And so we basically have looked at using Amazon Web Services. We did do this. Give me 1 second. Okay, Cameron is joining us now. So we did look at doing that as well using Amazon Web Services. We did do this for the March timeframe, March, April, and early May timeframe for certain courses in engineering and computer sciences. And now we're looking at basically virtualizing those desktops for every discipline that we have on campus. So essentially, everything that we have running in our data center, we're going to forklift move that to the cloud to be able to service those students and faculty from whether they're here on campus or if they are elsewhere. Okay, and so we're going to have to be able to do all of that simultaneously. For example, if Dr. Spencer is teaching her class, she has certain students that are physically with her, and then the others are either in their dorm room or they are remote. We have to be able to do all of that at the same time. So we feel that this solution that we have in front of you will allow that to occur. Because it is a lot of moving parts that we have, we're having to bring in some IT contingent labor to help us get all of this ready. And so with that, I'll open up for questions. The one thing I didn't say is on the monthly cost for students for a PC deployment, we also looked at that certain students, depending upon where they lived, did not have access to the internet. And so we have also looked at being able to provide that internet solution to them as well as a device. Any questions? Okay, probably not clear. Probably.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I did great. This is Greg Worley. I raised my hand for a question.
Mr. Worley. Yes, sir. You're recognized, Mr.
So of this cost, the cost that has been identified, is this are all these costs mandatory for the upcoming year? You must have it in place in order for us to be successful.
This is the solution. What we found coming out of the March timeframe is that when we went remote, certain disciplines did not have a way to continue to teach. For example, we have 1,380 computers that comprise our computer labs across the campus. Those computers sat idle. And so what we're doing is rather than continue to rely on physical devices to be able to service the community, we're looking to be able to provide that same experience using virtual connections to those.
So the answer to the question is yes, you need another $5.9 million for this upcoming year.
That is what we are asking the administration to provide. That is correct.
And that is pretty much mandatory, not discretionary, is what I was hearing.
Well, there's lots of different ways to do things, but we feel that this is the best solution.
Okay. And do we have enough lead time to put these items in place before August 17th?
That is the purpose of us leveraging IT contingent labor services rather than try to do it all ourselves. We're actually going to have to get additional hands in place to be able to do it.
Will any of this cost, the $5.9 million, displace any of the existing costs that we already have in the budget, or is all of this new?
This is all
new.
All of the this is all new.
Okay.
This is all
Thank
new.
You, Mr.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is all new costs, but it's also things that have been identified that we have been coming to the board with when we say virtualized desktop. We have been talking about that for the last several years. And so because of the current pandemic, we're having to accelerate building this infrastructure out to be able to do it. The good thing about Amazon Web Services, it's always up, it's always available. So this is going to allow us to have a high availability thing because as students are displaced, for those that depend upon synchronous instruction, they are going to have that experience. But for those where the faculty has chosen to provide asynchronous instruction, the environment always has to be available for whenever the student is available to attend the class. So we think this is the best way to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. Any other questions for Mr. Harris?
I had one here on the $2 million will get how many laptops?
Okay, the laptops for the student is we're basing it upon 4,000, and for the faculty and staff, we're talking about 1,000.
And they'll be the same, like an Apple?
They will be a Chromebook.
Okay. That'll be part of tuition, a new part of tuition, to sure everyone has one?
I follow the question.
Will that roll in
I can
tuition?
answer this one. This year, the new devices won't be a part of tuition and fees. It might be something that we bring back for next year as an ongoing thing, is to look at upgrading our technology fee to include devices on campus. But it is not, we are not asking for a change in fees for this year.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sessoms. Mr. Richardson.
Again, my hand is up for the wrong reason. Now I will take it down now that I know how to get it down. Thank you. I promise no more problems.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Dr. Brown?
The laptops for the students, are they theirs permanently? I just heard about raising the technology fee. Are they theirs permanently, or they're theirs to use just for the semester and then they're turned in? That's my first question.
Right. So the devices that we're looking at, ma'am, is designed to be able to stay with that student for the entire time that they're here at VSU. So if you anticipate that the bulk of our students are gone by 6 years, the economic value of that device is pretty much fully depreciated, so it becomes their device.
Okay. All right. So we'd be looking at, okay, so the next year we're looking at potentially raising technology fee to include that cost, and we cross that bridge when we get to it, is what I just kind of heard. Correct? Okay. Second question is, I'm looking at the footnote at the bottom of that. Mr. Worley refers to the 5.9, which I see, in your matrix, but then I see the note that says, but it does not include 3.5 in the licensing. So we're really looking at 9 million?
No, that 3.5 million, ma'am, is what we currently spend on academic licensing anyway.
And that's already in the budget?
That's already in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
And what we highlighted is that we're transferring the software, that $3.5 million in software, from being on physical devices in VSU's campus to placing that in the cloud to be able to get to that same software.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
That concludes my presentation, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Yes, Abdullah.
I think Mr. Gray is here. It might be best to get his question, I think, at this time.
Mr. Gray?
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I am Cameron Gray. I serve as the newly elected SGA president. And my question is, how are we going to accolade for the greater financial aid need for and appeals for our students? FAFSA has not updated for the current situation we are in, and students may not have the merit because of the financial situation post-COVID-19.
Thank you very much. I'll take that one. We are in constant conversations. Myself and the president of Norfolk State met with any number of members of the General Assembly this week and last week, as well as pushing for upgraded Pell Grant from the federal government. And we've said exactly what you said, is that in this very particular time for all students, whether they're at Virginia State, Norfolk State, or any institution, that for students who have particular financial need, that need will be exacerbated this year coming up. And that FAFSA hasn't been updated yet, and so people's financial condition isn't even accurately reflected on the FAFSA. And so what we've asked the General Assembly to do is to put their thumb on the scale for financial aid so that a generation of students isn't lost. Your message is exactly the same as my message. I will continue to say that privately, And I may ask you to come deliver it even better than I do. But we are greatly concerned about trying to make sure that we increase the amount of financial aid that we have to be able to support our students, but more importantly, to increase the financial aid in India to not lose an entire generation of young people.
Thank you, Perez.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Was there a second part of your question, sir?
That was all I had. The only question I had.
Thank you and welcome. We're glad you were able to join us. Dr. Spencer.
Dr. Winstead, I had a question about the budget. I'm looking and I'm calculating as we're moving along, and it looks like we're probably at about close to $9 million in new revenue or new expenditures. And I'll probably just reserve my question for Mr. Davenport. But the Senate's large concern is making sure that we're able to not only survive COVID-19, but we're able to make sure that we sustain Virginia State University and grow Virginia State University. And especially at this juncture, one of the primary concerns that I have is making sure that the cost of having Virginia State to survive at this moment does not impact both faculty and staff who work on the front lines and who are absolutely essential to making this university not only function through COVID, but to restore itself. So I am wondering, where we're looking at a decline in enrollment, we're looking at a decline in the amount of students who are going to be on campus. We are looking at possible reductions in state funding. And then I'm looking at all of these new costs that are going to be necessary, and I'm trying to figure out where that money is going to come from. And I am prayerful that the board will be absolutely supportive in making sure that, and President Abdullah, I know you're already on top of this, but I just have to say it for my constituents, that the board will be on top of making sure that we don't have to incur any cuts or furloughs that are going to damage our ability not only to survive, but to recover and restore Virginia State post-COVID. So I just wanted to say that, and I guess I'll reserve my question for Mr. Davenport.
Dr. Spencer, thank you very much. We hear you and understand your concern. And are there any other questions for Mr. Harris as we move into the budget discussion with Mr. Davenport?
I did have one more slide to present, Mr. Rector.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was moving fast. Thank you.
That's okay. So coming out of the pandemic, we're going to have to basically begin right now working on a new VSU website. Everyone coming out of COVID-19 is going to be trying to recruit the same students and the same donors. So we need to start today to work on our new website to begin to have that in place in about 12 weeks. So we've also taken a look at what will it take to enhance our website experience, and it will be a one-time cost of about $346,000, and then monthly hosting charges, because we would basically move that to Amazon Web Services as well, so that it's always available, and that's about $2,000 per month. Okay, but this is going to be necessary for us to reach the hearts and minds of students and prospective students to be able to communicate information to both groups, so that and it reflects on what the university is going to look like. Without students being able to physically come to campus, without all of them being able to come, the website is going to be our principal vehicle for being able to reach their hearts and minds. Thank you.
Any questions regarding the development and launching of a new VSU website? Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Davenport.
It's Mr. Davenport.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? I'm a little choppy on my side.
I can hear you, Mr.
Everyone
Davenport.
hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. All right. Good morning. I think you've heard from the team on our plan for opening for the fall semester and to do so in a very safe way. And what I'm going to walk you through is the plan on the impact on the entire budget. There was a slide before this, but just very briefly, overall, we're looking at about $11 million in costs. That's when you add up from all of the different presentations. And I think, each person generally kind of walk through the different expenditures that they're looking in their area. We're looking at about $11 million. What I'm going to present here in terms of the total budget impact, I'm going to go through the portion of it from a revenue standpoint, as well as the additional expenditures that we're putting on the table because of COVID. So this is the top half of the budget impact sheet. This, for the most part, builds upon what we talked about at the last meeting. If you recall, we ended up approving a budget for a 10% enrollment reduction. The president and I still believe that's where we need to be. We think that there's, although enrollment numbers and the numbers we look at on a weekly basis are looking pretty good, we still think there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and we want to keep that on the table. It was presented as the budget. And if you recall, I did a couple of scenarios. One scenario was, what if that enrollment was a little bit more than the 10% reduction? And I think we folded in some state reductions as well. And that came to about 26 million. And we looked at, well, what if we just didn't open up at all on-campus operations? And if we just went to a completely online format, we were looking at a revenue hit of about $50 million. So this is where we're at now. I want to advise everyone or caution everyone. I think Dr. Abdullah talked about it a little bit, and some others talked about it. This thing is very fluid. I mean, we're finding that the information changes almost daily, so, we're continuing to work through it. But at this particular point, this is our best snapshot of what we think it's going to look like. So this top sheet, you drop down to line 11, you can see that tuition. It will be taking a hit of about 3.8 million in terms of reduced tuition. That is directly attributable to that projected 10% decline in enrollment. Also, total revenue loss in that 10% on the E&G side, the education in general side, would be $4.1 million. Then if you look right below that, I will walk through the auxiliaries in detail, but you can see the impact on the auxiliary revenues are pretty substantial. That's primarily driven by having fewer students on campus. Dr. Palm talked about the 2,800, and we're bringing it down to 1,740. Our Res Life staff, went through all of the spaces and determined that was really the kind of safe number for us in terms of getting that social distancing and spreading people out. So when you look at the total revenue loss from our current plans right now, we're looking at about 15 million. But again, we're still looking. There are other revenue categories, particularly on the auxiliary side. You'll see we're still looking at them. We think there's going to be more of a hit. But for the purposes of where we're at today, at least this 15 million in revenue appears to would be short, because of the COVID. And if you drop down to the expenditure side, you can see the expenditures. If you look at line 43, that is the 11 million that I talked about. Again, when you sum up everybody's plans, it'll come up to that $11 million. Now, some of those $11 million charges are on the auxiliary side, and some of them on the E&G side. My staff is really still kind of clearing that up, so there may be some movements between it. But to the best of what we've been able to figure out thus far, on that 11 million, we're looking at about 9.9 million of it being on the ENG side, about 1.1 million on the auxiliary side. So you can see what's highlighted in yellow is the additional expenditures on the ENG side, and additional expenditures on the auxiliary side is right below that. And then if you look down at the bottom, the total expenditures are 11 million. You add that to 15 million that we talked about for the enrollment. So with all of this, everything that you heard today, we're looking at a budgetary, total budgetary impact of about 26 million. And that's of course, a pretty big number for this institution. You can see, our total expenditures, with sponsored programs and other things are 173. So it's a pretty big chunk of our total operations. For the purposes of this form, I don't want to alarm anyone. We just went on and just spread that 9.9 million on the ENG side proportionally to each one of those categories. Not that we would do it proportionally to each category. The president still has the saying, he's still, protecting, classroom instruction. We're trying as much as possible on the administrative side. So, hope, that 5 million is, again, we're just showing this to spread costs. But the 9.9 is, again, looks like real cost. There could be some opportunities for reducing those. I think Jane may have talked about some of those in her presentation, particularly like with cleaning facilities where, the president would like to move forward with the teleworking plan. And if we can have a lot of people teleworking and not on campus, particularly on the administrative side, our thought is kind of rediverting those cleaning efforts elsewhere. So that is, again, in summary on this 26 million on the ENG, you got the revenue loss of 4.1, and you got about $9.9 million of additional expenses. That's a total on the ENG side of about 14 million. On the auxiliary side, if you recall, and he's scrolling up, that 11 million, that's on line 19, auxiliary, that's the revenue impact from the auxiliary. And if you down the additional expenditures for auxiliary, they are there, on line 38, the 1,161,000. So that's about a total about 12 million on the auxiliary side and about 14 million on the ENG side. I'll come back to this schedule. Can you flip to the auxiliary? I'll kind of go through that first, where those reductions would have to come from. Again, we're talking about a total of 12 million, about $1 million for the expenses, and about, 11 million or 10 some million for lost revenue. The first line, or line 8 up there, is residence life. That is directly attributable to having fewer students on campus. The budgetary impact for that would be 5.8 million. The comprehensive fee, just to remind you, that is a fee that supports a number of student services, athletic, student health, student activities, a number of different things that would take and that's mainly because of the 10% reduction, would take a reduced revenue of about 1.1 million. And then below that, we have food service. Again, we're having fewer students on campus. We have fewer students on the meal plan. That revenue impact would be roughly about 3.9. And then if you recall, we got the campus improvement fee, that small would be impacted by having fewer students too. So you see that going down 10%. So when you add up all of the revenue on that side, it comes to that 11 million. And if you drop down, I'm showing where the expenditures would have to be dropped. Can you scroll down? So here's where if you look down at that total line 43, that's the 11 million, and that's a detail of each one of the areas would be taking a cut, and approximately, what that cut would be, or the reduction. And starting with food service, that 3.9, we actually look fairly good with the food service part. I think you all know we have a contract with Thompson Hospital. That contract, then it has a sliding scale, and we're way below the sliding scale. But again, we've been able to work with our contractor, and we believe we can make it self-sufficient. Some of that is, Dr. Palm talked about some of the decisions made, and that's having a positive impact on food service. As an example, with the students being the last day right before Thanksgiving and then even not coming back, we get to save, all of that in terms of food service with them not coming back and eating those meals. Also, part of this proposal is we're having fewer students on campus. We'll be looking to close down Gateway for students. It's something we did a few years ago. Jones Hall would be open, and we would leave Foster Hall open because the Subway and the Chick-fil-A is a very, very popular thing with the students. So those will stay open. But that 3.9 reduction in food service should be fine. If you drop down and well, let me back up on the next. Well, no, you're good. Line. Can you move up a little bit? All right, right there. Yeah, line. Site is getting really bad. Not below 27. I'll come back to 27. That's Res Life. Well, I'll do it now. Well, I'll come back. That's Res Life. Below Res Life is all, if you sum up the starting with athletics, the 620,000 all the way down to the bottom, that's all comp fee. So those all reductions are being reduced because of the 10% enrollment reduction on the comp fee. I can tell you for most of those areas that are highlighted, we are looking to take the reductions in most of them, not all of them. Athletics, we're looking to take a reduction there. Student activities, we're still being a little sensitive to it. Dr. Palm and his staff are still working it out. Certainly, an area like student health services, we're not willing to take any reductions in student health services. I think you saw the presentation. So we're still working them out, but that's based on a comp fee allocation about what each area would have to contribute to the reductions. These areas, most people have been notified of it, and they've been working on their reduction strategies. And if you move back up, the most challenging thing here for the auxiliary, oh, no, we're still right. To line 27. K27. That's $5.8 million in residence life. And if you look at that relative to their total budget, they only budgeted $8.8 million. So that huge impact on the budget. Obviously, with Dr. Palm, residence life staff, walking through it, we didn't think it was a very good idea to lay off an entire residence life staff. We're still going to have these 1,700 students here. We still want to make sure that we have a safe environment for those students. So this is really going to be a challenge. Part of the reason why this is a huge challenge and such a large portion of the budget, if you drop down, can you drop down a little bit? Is right here on line 46. That's debt service. That's the debt that we pay on our residence hall facilities. That's the annual debt service payments. Those must be paid. There are no way out of those debt service payments. Of course, we've been talking to the state. We're looking at other options, but they have to be serviced. So that revenue, and this came up when we did the room and board refunds too. We pulled that off the top before we calculated what the refunds are. That has to be serviced, and because of that, that entire amount of reduction is really falling on Res Life. So this is an area that where we quite possibly, or in all likelihood, will have to use up some of our reserves to be able to continue to make that debt service payment, because that $5 million, if you go back up, the $5 million, that type of cut, that will not be able to occur. We will not be able to cut residence life staff by $5 million, having 1,700 students on campus. Any questions about that? I think that's a really important point before I kind of move on that piece.
Hi, Kevin, this is Jay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Is there any possibility at all that not just Virginia State, but some of the other schools could get together and petition the Commonwealth to look at a restructuring of student housing debt? Because I would guess other institutions would be in a similar problem. Restructure the debt and maybe get a debt holiday interest rates are super low. You know, what are the chances of getting something like that accomplished?
I probably really tough. I think getting that day is a possibility. You know, working with the state. One of the things the debt markets is the debt markets are in a disarray. I mean, there's been a lot of people that have not been able to issue debt. There's a huge backlog, and it's just a lot of disruption. And the state contacted us and advised, everyone who issued that has occurred, and some of the dates where they were posted.
Kevin, your communication is blinking.
People, yes. Breaking up. Can you hear me?
You're breaking up. You're breaking up.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me? I can try to move to another area of the house. Can we try that?
No, I let's see if it'll catch up.
Mr. Rector?
I'm almost through.
Mr. Rector?
Answer your question, Jay. No, I don't think it'd be easy, but I think in getting relief, that's certainly something we all been talking about, and I think the president may want to weigh in on it.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. That has been something that's come up at the Council of Presidents meetings with the presidents together, and it is a strategy that we are taking a look at. So it is an active conversation about a form of debt relief.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah.
All right.
Proceed, Kevin.
You can hear?
Yep.
All right, if you can go back to the Hebe.
Chairman, I do have a question. I have
Anything else on the auxiliary before we leave that?
Mr. Worley?
Yes, Kevin, I don't have the schedule in front of me. I mean, so I haven't had a chance to study this stuff because it wasn't provided in advance. But could you go back to that line where you're talking 5,189? I don't.
Not hearing any.
I think it was line. It was in the auxiliary reserve. And it was a 5 million.
I really can't hear at all. I have no idea what the question is.
Okay, hang on a second. Hang on.
Okay, I can log out and try to log back in at a different spot in the house, or others having connectivity problems here.
Mr. Rector, I can hear, and I might be able to answer his question.
Okay.
I might be, if we want to try.
Okay.
So what I was trying to understand is, what is the 5,819,789? You're showing it as a reduction in expenditures. I can't see the column G, so I'm assuming the column G is the budget that we approved in May. And I'm assuming that column I is the revised budget after taking in consideration the reductions that we just talked about through the.
I'm sorry.
So what my question is, what is the 5,819?
5.9 reduction is a reduction.
Facility.
Go ahead, Mr. Davenport. They can hear you. I can hear you. Go ahead.
You can hear me? Okay. All right. Yeah, the $5.8 million reduction is the amount of expenses that we would have to reduce in residence facilities. We have fewer students on campus. The 1,740 students as compared to our capacity, which is more like 2,800. So that is, we have less revenue. We have to cut out expenses on the residence facility side of 5.8 million. I was just showing that some of the reason why it's proportionally larger is because of the debt.
Okay, that's the part that I didn't understand. I knew your revenue was going down because of 1,740. You were converting your dorm rooms to be one student in a dorm versus two. That doesn't mean that your cost is going to go down $5,819,000. It means that your revenue is going down, but you still have to operate that facility. So I was confused.
I'm just showing this. This is can you scroll down, Hubie? I'm just showing this is the total budgetary impact. You see on line 52, the total budgetary impact on the auxiliary side is 12 million.
So let me state my question a different way, Kevin. Our revenue is going to be down in housing because we are putting less students. We're able to do less students on campus. Basically, a room that could hold two will now.
I can't really hear it clearly.
Mr. Worley, hang on a second.
I'll take it. I can take this. I can take this question as best I can. Can you scroll up a little bit, Mr. Harris?
So, Mr. President, Mr. President, let me ask the question again.
Yes, sir.
If we have 1,740 students on campus, and that's largely because we are converting a dorm room from that would normally accommodate two into one person per room. I get that. That means that there will be a reduction in our revenue because we're housing less students on campus. I get that. But we still have to operate the dorm, and I don't see how $5,819,000 less in revenue converts into reducing the expenditures. The whole dorm still has to be maintained.
Yes, sir. Yes,
that
sir.
part didn't make sense to me.
Yes, sir. You are absolutely correct. So you're absolutely correct, and I don't. And while this this schedule may not reflect that, that's also what Kevin was trying to say. And so I believe what he was doing here is trying to show the $11 million revenue loss and show what would happen if we tried to do an $11 million expenditure reduction and dividing it up into different areas. And for some of the areas, that is entirely possible, and it gives them a good target to look at in terms of coming up with some expenditure reduction plans. In other areas, specifically in student health and in residence life, it's certainly not going to be possible because we need to upgrade student health, as we just talked about, and because we know that not only do we have to have the regular expenditures from staffing and from activities, but we also have a debt service payment that would not be covered if we reduce the budget in residence life to $3 million. And so this was more, so he's saying exactly what you're saying, is that in some areas we will be able to make these reductions and people are planning on it. In other areas, we're not going to be able to make the revenue reductions, and that some of those funds will have to come from our reserves. So he's saying the exact same thing, but this slide reflects what, if it was possible to do the $11 million cut, this is what it would look like. But we also recognize that it is not possible to do an $11 million cut, particularly a $6 million cut in residence life. I hope I've answered the question.
So Mr. President, what you're telling me then, and I can't control this schedule in front of me, but the bottom line is our deficit is going to be more like 31 million, not the 26 as reported on the bottom line. So we are looking more like 31 million because this $5 million is going to have to come from somewhere. Now, the budget did not show where this money was coming from reserve.
Right. It does not show that. The budget, these budgets are not showing kind of one-time costs that we have that we can apply towards things. For instance, we've got some monies in Title III, there's the Equipment Trust Fund, and there's the reserves. We're still trying to figure out exactly how much would come from reserves, but Kevin did articulate that in order to, particularly because of residence life, that we would need to possibly go into reserves to meet that obligation and particularly that debt service, while also reflecting the idea that we are trying to go to the state for some relief on that. and some relief on some other things as well. And so I guess what I'm trying to explain is that you're right, but no, that it wouldn't change the total deficit number of 26 million. It's just the idea that we might apply money from the reserves to cover some of that $26 million.
Okay, Mr.
The
President,
20
I will back off the discussion right now. And it's just that I'm not accustomed to presenting numbers that way, but you try to get a handle on what your total deficit may be, and then you try to determine where you would get what other bucket you would go to try to fund that deficit. So I will back off at this point, but let me ask this other question. How much reserve do we have that we can tap into to address this potential $26 million deficit or $31 million deficit, depends on who's correct?
I think our total amount in reserves as
it's 26.
I'm sorry. Okay, 26 million?
Total amount of reserves, we like to keep, if you recall, we had a methodology, we like to keep the 21 million. We've been on track. We've generally run a little bit higher than that 21 million. If you recall, we did have some excess reserves, but we have used some of those reserves for the Harris Hall project. But to answer your question, roughly about 21 million in reserve funds.
And let me answer the other question. We do not anticipate, nor are we planning or asking the board to use the entirety of our reserves to move forward. There'd be some money that comes from reserves. There are other one-time areas, including federal stimulus dollars that we would use. And then, of course, we have to do some expenditure reduction. And so Mr. Davenport is kind of walking through some of that now.
Mr. Chairman, I do have another question, and that question is related to the online, the tuition, and I asked Dr. Palm this question, and he asked that I defer it until we got to Mr. Davenport's presentation. Will there be a difference in our online tuition versus face-to-face tuition? Because your schedule predicts a downfall of 10% in enrollment. It did not address whether or not the tuition rates would change based upon online or face-to-face students.
We were not asking the board for a change in tuition and fee rates.
So the answer to the question is that those who have to attend the classes via online will pay the same tuition rate as those that are going to the face-to-face class.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, did Ms. Hunter, did she need to sign off?
I'm still here, but at 12:15, I won't be on 12:15.
Did you have a question with regards to the budget component?
I do not.
Mr. Davenport, if you can hear well, I think you wanted to go back to
I move back to the other sheet. To the ENG part. And the same kind of methodology. Where I'm coming, if you look at that bottom line again, that's the total budgetary impact, and I'm just the top half is the lost revenue, the bottom half is the additional expenditures. Adding the two together and showing the total budgetary impact. That's what, and that's on the auxiliary schedule as well. Oh, it went out. Did it go out, or can you all see it?
I don't see it.
I no longer see it on my screen.
I don't see it.
Yeah. All right. So on the expenditure side, if you recall, on the revenues, I showed where that 10% reduction is result in less revenues of 4.1 million. And you can see on the expenditure side, line 35, those are the additional E&G expenditures for COVID-19. If you add that 9.9, a shortfall for the expenditures to the revenue shortfall that's above. You don't need to scroll up though, but that's above a 4 million. That's a total of about a $14 million reduction in auxiliary. So to summarize that 26 million, we'll need 14 million reduction from, did I say the wrong number? 14 million from E&G, and from auxiliaries another 12 million. That's how you break out that 26 million. On the E&G part, I can tell you that's a pretty substantial amount, but we do have some monies. I think you all know we have the minority serving institution money that we anticipate to come in. Now, these other sources, we're not trying to apply these other sources immediately. The president really wants to be conservative, wants to hold those funds as much as possible. So he's asked, each one of our areas to really try to come up with the appropriate level of reductions to reduce our expenditures without the stimulus funds. But in all likelihood, we're probably going to need a little bit of the stimulus funds to fill that gap. But of that 14 million, we feel pretty good or we're looking at reduction. We think we can get about 5 million or so, but we're looking at doing the same things that we, or continue the same practices. I think you all know we've hired the holding only mission personnel. The other thing is we have FA contracts. We've taken a really hard look at our FA contracts. Some of those contracts we're just not going to be able to renew. We're going to need to take it for the budget reduction. Some of those contracts we need to move to a month-to-month, and we're going to have to be really careful with them. Vacancies, we've been working with vacancies over the last couple of months as people have kind of been at home. We've held these vacancies. We think we can get tremendous savings that way with reallocating staff time, in an appropriate way to address some of those vacancies. Also, the president, the provost would like to work with the deans, particularly with the term faculty. We believe we've identified some areas there that could be trimmed back. Also, temps. We're looking at temps, across the board, particularly on the administrative side. I have several different temps, looking at not reassigning those, but taking existing classified employees that we feel like may have a little gap in productivity and assigning those responsibilities to those staffs. And then finally, one of the things that the president wants to look at, and other institutions have been doing this, and we think it's reasonable, is certainly looking at pay, and particularly executive pay, and maybe trying to roll some of that back as well too. And we with all of that, we can get a pretty good chunk of the reductions that we would need. On the non-personal services side, we're looking at continuing our same practices. Again, we have a freeze there, and we're looking at entering into this year. There will be a freeze on hiring and a freeze on purchasing for the entire year. And we're still going to enter into the year with the same premise that only half of the budget will be loaded. So again, we're going to reduce the budget by that 10% to account for the enrollment, the anticipated enrollment decline, and then we're only going to load half the budget. We think we need to continue with those type of practices, and we think by doing so we're going to get some tremendous savings on a non-personal services side. Certainly, discretionary spending, travel. We're not envisioning that people would be going to a lot of conferences, and all of the discretionary spending. Like I said, we're cutting all that out. You may recall Multi Center. That's another area. I have basically initiated all 3 phases of their layoff and furlough plans. So I'm looking to drop back on a multi-purpose center. There will really be no big major events. You recall we were losing a lot of money with it, with kind of reducing expenses. I hope to get some savings and kind of just use the multi-purpose center for the university activities, and to make sure that the university can use the multi-purpose to help with the social distancing. And then there's a whole category we've identified of various things that we kind of consider. I think Dr. Abdullah alluded to it, like temporary expectations, or like to call them like comfort items. It's reductions that we believe that we can take that just may be a little bit more inconvenient. Our service levels may change a little bit. Some examples of those are on the printing side. I actually think I can print. We have a contract with a printer. I think I can remove a lot of the printers out of the offices, but that will recall different offices, including myself, and probably including the president, to have to walk, to the copier, and that's going to be, all throughout the institution. Setting temperature controls. We go through a lot with making people comfortable, and we get called, and we're, raise it up and lower it, and we're looking at just setting a standard temperature. And I believe probably people will feel a certain level of discomfort because that temperature gauge will be set. We think the savings on that could be pretty substantial, and that's why we're putting that on the table. Grounds is another area. I mean, we're still very proud of our ground, so we don't want to tear it down, but certainly the grass may be a little bit longer. Probably the plants and flowers and things like that, we'll be trimming back. So we're looking at a lot of areas like that in terms of trimming back, trying to take the reduction in that manner. Still trying to protect particularly the instruction in the classroom as much as possible, but obviously you see with the level of 26 million, that's not going to be able to just not touch it at all.
Dr. Spencer, did you have a question?
Thank you, Rector Wednesday. Yes, I did. The first thing is I wanted to go back on the tuition, and President Abdullah, you said that there will be no tuition changes. How are we going to rationalize that for our students, both our in-state and out-of-state students, when we determine that there are going to be 1,740 students on campus, which would leave, according to the numbers that you all are talking about, which would leave roughly 2,000 students who are not on campus and who are now being pretty much forced to do online, both in-state and out-of-state. So one, the question is, how are we going to justify that to the students and the parents, that the students who are being forced to do online classes or remote instruction, both in-state and out-of-state, are going to have to pay in-state and out-of-state tuition versus the students who are on campus? That's my first question. And I have two others. So that was my first question.
Let me start with in-state. I think what we really want to do is to find a way to reduce the net cost of in-state tuition by continuing to fight for more financial aid, trying to raise more money to do that. I think it is going to be a challenge. I do understand that there are those who will feel as if that they're not getting the experience that they want from Virginia State, and therefore don't necessarily want to pay the money for VSU. One, we are still very, very, very affordable as it relates to the Commonwealth of Virginia, and trying to get more financial aid so that we can lower the net cost and provide more financial aid for students is the direction that we're trying to go. For out of state, that is a very interesting question. I'm not sure that we've come up with a good solution for that question, particularly as it relates to out of state students. We do know that we will have it. We do know that students will, that there will be students who will balk a bit or more than a bit for paying out-of-state tuition when they are in fact not in Virginia. That is a question that I know is coming. We do not have a good answer for that now. And so I won't attempt to provide a good explanation for it because I don't have a good answer for it. So in-state, yeah, go ahead.
So that would then impact, if Kevin is looking at a 10% reduction, if you're looking at not switching or not changing or altering the tuition rates for in-state and out-of-state students who are going to be forced to do remote instruction, then that 10% enrollment reduction seems to be a little nice. I mean, we will lose students. I mean, why would a student pay full out-of-state tuition to come to Virginia State and have to do remote when they could go to a local institution and either do face-to-face or online instruction for less? So wouldn't that impact the 10% that Mr. Davenport was talking about? And then how much of an impact would that be? Because that seems like, I mean, 10%, that seems like that would probably increase that enrollment number significantly. So have we considered that?
Definitely, definitely. So I think that's really the that's the revenue question in a nutshell. That if we charge the regular tuition, that we may have fewer students. If we charge less tuition, we may have more students and less revenue. And so no matter how it breaks out, there's kind of this revenue challenge that's sitting on us. One of the benefits, if there is a silver lining in having fewer students in the residence hall, it is that we are provide more financial aid for students who are on campus, because we have fewer students that we're trying to meet a $20,000 threshold, if you will, right, for tuition and room and board. And we have more students where we're trying to meet a $10,000 threshold, we're talking about particularly in-state students. And so that is a benefit that can also help drive students to remain if we can provide additional financial aid. No, that is a very difficult question. I don't pretend to have an easy answer for it. I will tell you this though. Right now, our freshman enrollment numbers are actually up over last year. And so the numbers that we're looking at actually don't show a 10% reduction in enrollment. We've kind of factored that in because we know that our numbers at this point, since we're in the COVID environment, are really unreliable because we've never seen numbers in this kind of environment. So I don't know if I'm answering your question to give you all of the level of detail that you would want. I think that is the question. And we are trying to do our best to try to answer it and to bring the revenue in to do the things that we need to do at Virginia State University. So that is the answer.
Thank you, President Abdullah. My next question, and the most important question, is for you, Mr. Davenport, because you kind of ran through it and I had to zero in, and that's on, I heard you say about furloughs, and I heard you talk about reductions in the FA positions, and then possible reductions in faculty. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to say this respectfully to the Board of Visitors. I love you guys, but I think in this critical juncture, it has to be said. A couple of years ago, when I first came on the board, one of the concerns that I raised in board meeting was that we were, and I don't want to use the word like, I forgot, Dr. Abdullah, what the word was, but I don't want to use the word that we had a reduction in faculty. But one of the issues that the Senate was concerned about was back then, the number of faculty who were transitioning out and not being replaced. And so I raised the issue that there were departments who, I'm going to just use the word, have faculty shortages. And so now you're talking about, and also not just in faculty, but also staff departments. And so Dr. Palm just said that we're going to invest $1.7 million in hiring new faculty to be able to accommodate the COVID crisis and the need to social distance. But now I hear that not only are faculty, perhaps you're looking at different departments, not only are faculty going to term faculty, adjunct faculty going to be looked at for potential cuts, but also within our staff departments, and some of our staff departments are also not up to par. And so if we're talking about shaving on the backs, and that's what I was talking about before, if we're talking about shaving on the backs of the frontline workers who are essential to this reciprocal relationship of recruitment, enrollment, persistence, and that's not just the teaching and learning environment, but that's all the frontline staff who funnel the students through, be it recruitment, be it the registrar's office, all of the frontline staff workers who are funneling these students through. If we're talking about either furloughing them or putting them on month to month based on these new numbers, then how are we going to restore, because COVID is going to pass, how are we going to restore Virginia State University? And I am really concerned about that. I'm concerned about where you all are planning to shave that money from to accommodate this. I'm very concerned about that. And that's all I'll say.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Is there a response? Was that a question?
I don't know. I thought she was just expressing, her concerns with, having to trim off the 14 million. I mean, we're doing the best that we can, I mean, obviously a lot of the points that you made, I think we all think are really good points, and they're very difficult struggling with, but it is in a real sense, that 26 million, we're going to need to address that. And that cannot just be done, without, having some type of impact on faculty or instruction. That's a pretty large, but I can just say that, I mean, we've been talking in the program, put forth plans that we feel like would really mitigate, as much as possible, any type of disruption that we have on campus.
Well, I would like to offer, because I don't want to come out and give my concerns without an offering, because both the Faculty Senate and a small informal task group have put together some alternative scenarios, and we haven't had a chance to sit down with you with administration as far as looking at where the money is going to be shaved, because that's not really our purview. However, we do have some recommendations of where the fat can be shaved before you actually get to the bone. And I would like to be able to, because there are several things that we have come up with that would take off at least $3.5 million. And that's just on our basic level. And so we would definitely want to be able to sit with you before we get to that.
Yeah, if you could talk to Dr. Palm, and Dr. Palm on the phone. Are you still on? Oh.
I am still on, and I heard you, Dr. Spencer. So again, we will have that conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Mr. Turnage. Mr. Turnage, did you have a question?
I don't think so. If I did, it was unintentional, my man.
That was a finger raise. Okay, thank you.
I switched devices. I left my computer. I'm on my car phone, so I hope I didn't do something that I was not supposed to.
No, we're okay. Dr. Brown.
Mr. Davenport, first of all, let me just say, we know the challenge that you have trying to make numbers work. I mean, I think all of us recognize that you got to move in target, and these times that it's difficult to give us some numbers that are going to be hard that we can hold you accountable to. But I share Mr. Worley's concerns, Dr. Spencer. I mean, all of us, I think, are on the right page in terms of all of our questions and comments and concerns about the budget. But most particularly, what's troubling right now, I guess, is the comment about what you've presented to us is what we should do or what we need to do based on the reduction in the tuition, not necessarily what we are going to do. So as Board of Visitors, when we're being presented a budget, something to approve or something to look forward to, it's hard to say we agree with what you're presenting when you're already acknowledging that may not be what you're going to do, especially, on the instructional line. That's the biggest chunk, that $5 million. And so I guess my concern or my question is, going forward, or even looking at the numbers, you're already telling us that's really not going to be able to compare actual going forward to these numbers, because this is not necessarily the aim or the number that you're trying to reach. In other words, the 5 million, I mean, that's the biggest number, if you follow what I'm saying. We know instruction. Okay, so I don't know what I'm looking at. I mean, I mean, we're having.
I think I need to really clarify something. This is not a budget. This is not a budget that I'm asking for approval. I'm showing the budgetary impact of different categories. This is like a working. It's not a budget, and I mean, it's not that document, and this is not being approval. This thing is just moving so much. I can't say this is exactly it. I mean, something can change tomorrow. The governor just made some new announcements, but based on the information that we have here, based on the plans that were presented, this is my way to try to show the trustees where these reductions would have to come from. There's 26 million that needs to be reduced from the budget. 14 million needs to come from E&G, and 12 needs to come from auxiliary. The expenditure section in the auxiliary, that's where those cuts will have to come from. However, as I've communicated, we fully understand that Res Life, we cannot cut out, $5 million. So I'm just showing where those cuts based on the revenues would be coming from.
Mr. Davenport, I agree with you totally, but in showing us that, you're also saying to us that if you do not, we got to come up with 26 million as a board. And you're already telling me we only got 21 million in reserves. So we're saying back to you, we hear you loud and clearly. So you have to make some hard decisions. And they've got to be made, because otherwise we're going to be sitting in our next meeting where actual numbers are coming in and revenue is down and you haven't made the hard cuts, and we're in trouble. So that's why I'm saying I understand right now it's a moving target, but I also think all the answers we've been given today have been back and forth. I think it does Dr. Spencer a disservice to say to her, we're not going to furlough or lay off faculty when the largest chunk is in instructions. That's 5 million. And you cannot make that statement to her. I mean, to me, you can't, because I know as a board, I'm going to tell you, I'm voting for, we got to look hard at that now, whether it's faculty furlough, whether it's whatever, but something's got to come off if that's the biggest chunk. So all we're saying is please don't make statements promising people stuff is not going to get cut when you've presented something to us that says this is where things should be cut, and that's just to get us to a $26 million impact. So if we're not even going to do these, then our impact is even larger. So, I mean, I think everybody is hearing everybody. I think we just don't have answers. I understand that. But I want everybody to hear we got problems and we have large dollar reserves that we're going to have to come up with or have answers to where they're going to come from, or we're going to have to make the hard choices. I mean, and I just think that's what this whole meeting was about. And I don't want us to get lost in one statement that says we're not going to furlough, or one statement that says, well, we might can do this and that. Because you gave us a lot of different scenarios, but no definitives. And that's my concern. You know, I think all of the suggestions are good. Can we quantify them and say, this is where we're going to make the cuts? And that's my concern right now. We're floating around where we know there are some areas that we just got to be definitive, because otherwise that bottom line numbers is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we don't have the dollars to cover it. That's my concern.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Dr. Abdullah.
Understood. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Exactly. Mr. Davenport, I think it would be good for them to understand, because again, I think we're, kind of staying here. And I think there's a level of depth that you have gone to. There is still a level of uncertainty, but there is a level of depth that you have gone to that I think is important for the board to understand and know. And so when we talk about E&G, and I believe that difference is what, $14 million? Kevin?
Yes.
Yes. The team has identified expenditure reductions to be moved on very soon. How much have we identified to be able to move on, Mr. Davenport?
Roughly about 8 million.
Thank you. Okay. With that 8 million, and on campus, in terms of one-time monies that we have, Title III money, not counting the CARES money right now, but counting the Title III money, counting equipment trust fund, a ballpark of funds that we have, about 3 million. And then how much do we have from the CARES money?
You're talking about the HBCU or the minority servicing piece, roughly 10.
10 million.
10. Yeah.
So 10.
So we have the other sources, but like I said, we're trying to hold them as much as possible. Not trying to put all of this just to all of the stimulus money to this problem.
I understand, because we still have unknowns going forward. Right? But right now, Dr. Brown, we have identified $8 million on E&G that we will reduce out of our budget of that 14. That which has been identified, we are now checking over and making sure we get the numbers right, and that that we can. There's rules and regulations of some of it, but we anticipate moving on that next week or the week after. We also want to get the proposal from the Faculty Senate before we move. But we have done that work on that side. On the auxiliary side, where there's, how much is the deficit in auxiliaries, Mr. Davenport?
12 million.
How much have we identified in terms of expenditure reductions on the auxiliary side? We're ready to move on.
Yeah, we've identified. all of those categories have been identified reductions with the exception of res life and of course student health.
You say $1 or $2 million?
Yeah, I mean, we've already identified how we need to move the contract down to take care of the deficit for food service, already taking care of all of the categories with the exception.
Okay, and the service, I think, was $3 million?
You look like you were talking. I couldn't tell.
Yours is breaking up.
I can't hear you, Dr. Abdullah, that well. I mean,
It's
you're
okay.
really choppy.
I got it. It's okay. It's okay, Mr. Davenport. So, Dr. Brown, on the auxiliary side, we've identified some of the expenditure reductions, probably approximately
Can't hear you.
$4 million.
Can't hear.
$4 million on the auxiliary side. The balance of that, we know we're going to have to use a level of reserves. Our reserves are in auxiliaries and specifically used for those debts. So debt service payment was $9 million. That's part of why we weren't able to get it down farther than that. And so we'll have to use a portion of our reserves to help in auxiliaries. We'll have to use a portion of the HBCU CARES money on the ENG side. And we're still trying to cut below that because we know that, again, things are very fluid and fluid in both ways. I mean, we could legitimately in 2 weeks come back and say that we're not going to have any revenue on campus because it's not appropriate to have any students on campus. Conversely, we could come back in 2 weeks and say that the social distancing guidelines have changed and we're going to have full occupancy in the residence halls. And so I hope that gives it I think what you were trying to ask is, have we been making the difficult decisions and are we ready to execute? The answer to that question is yes. Unequivocally yes.
Okay. Ms. Curry.
Thank you. Just real quick, sort of going back to the tuition and any tuition differentiation. For the work I do, I've been keeping up with all the other institutions in Virginia and also some nationally. And there really aren't differentiating, as we've reiterated a bunch of times, because things are so fluid. I haven't seen any institution in Virginia that's going to differentiate for those students who are being served on campus and those who have to do all or part of their studies online. So I think, I just don't think that's the way people are handling this. So I think that would be in keeping with Dr. Abdullah's statement that we weren't being asked to look at any tuition differential.
Dr. Spencer.
I saw Visitor Hill's name hand pop up, so I'll defer to him and I'll just go after him.
Thank you. Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Thank you, Mr. Rector. I have been quiet because I think all of you know I've had concerns about our financial situation before COVID. I've become increasingly more concerned in listening to the conversations today. I think Dr. Brown is right on point in terms of we understand that tough decisions may have to be made, but I think we should not ignore feedback from all of the critical stakeholders in arriving at those decisions. And I don't think we should ignore or do a disservice to anyone involved in this process. And I would simply ask my colleagues and all others to understand that we can resolve this matter or these matters well if we recognize, appreciate, and involve all of the stakeholders who may bring things to the table that we haven't considered. And I would simply ask that we have the patience and the sensitivities to do exactly that. That is all I have, and I'm not going to say anymore. I think I've said enough over the last couple of years. And this is the same theme that concerns me. And I hope this time we have the courage to do the right thing the right way. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Charlotte. Dr. Spencer.
I just wanted to reiterate too, when we're looking at possible transitions, or well, first I'm just arguing and I'm asking both my administration, President Abdullah, Kevin Davenport, and the board to put the taking of term faculty, if it can't be taken off, it needs to be placed at the bottom. And if the implication is to replace term faculty with adjuncts, I want to advise the board that there are SACS implications to that. And then there's also going to be the reciprocal implication of the quality of instruction that's going to drive our recovery. So, I think that, and Dr. Abdullah, maybe you could clarify that too, but I think that we need to remember that there are SACS guidelines about the numbers of adjuncts at a university. And so that could possibly impact Virginia State long term. And also when you're talking about the quality of instruction, and if the goal is to recover, making that cut and making that move would definitely impact the quality of instruction, which would definitely have a long-term impact, a definite long-term impact on Virginia State's recovery in the future. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Spencer.
I'll go ahead and clarify. In terms of our percentage of full-time faculty across departments and across the university, we are well in compliance. And so I wouldn't anticipate us moving outside of compliance in that way. But on the other point that she said, we do understand having a department that has more adjuncts, generally full-time faculty are more conducive to an overall quality because of the ability to participate in meetings, participate in other things. And so as we start to move in some areas to more adjuncts, we'll have to do some things to make sure that we can keep our quality high. That is a very legitimate concern that we're going to have to.
Any other comments from visitors?
Mr. Chairman, I've had my hand up for a while.
Okay.
This is Greg Gary. I won't repeat everything that's been said, but I do support what Ms. Brown said, Dr. Brown said about getting into the specifics. I think this is going to be a new normal, in particular a new normal as these finance committees meet, because we're going to have much more detail to try to figure out the financial issues that we have in front of us and the solutions. And I think we're going to need to start the meeting in June, as we agreed to. But as we talked about these other revenues and opportunities, I'm also reminded of the last meeting that we have other challenges that we didn't even talk about today, and that is we know we have these questionable costs from NIFA that's going to have to be repaid. The CFO indicated at the last meeting that he didn't know where these funds would come from. That it shouldn't be paid on the backs of the students. We have these costs that we know that's going to be due pretty quickly. So that's going to be another challenge that we will have to deal with. So I think that there are a number of issues. And I think that the quicker that we can get back to meeting with the finance committee meeting and looking at these details, the better off that we will be. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. Mr. Stegmeyer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Director. First of all, I want to say I appreciate the opportunity to have staff kind of introduce us to a little bit more detail. I think we all knew this was coming. It's certainly difficult times for everyone, and I think that as a rector, as you said at the beginning of the program today, there's a lot more going on that's weighing us besides just these financial problems. And because of all of that, I really wanted to take the opportunity to thank the staff for their efforts. I understand there's still a lot of unknowns. We all have a lot of work to do. But I also wanted to say I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to be with you all for another term of the board. And it's really, really important to me that we keep in mind the value of what we're doing. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, we do have to address the financial issues. We have to figure out a way to balance a budget and try to preserve services for students. Most of us are old enough, we've lived through some tough times before, and we know we can get through it. The mission of Virginia State has always been important to our society and our nation, but I don't think it's ever been more important than it is today. And I think it's incumbent on us as board members, as we go through the struggle, we realize that life isn't easy, it isn't always fair to us. But what we're doing is really, really important. And I think that ought to give us a little bit of hope, and it ought to give us a little bit of optimism. Because no matter how tough this task is going to be, what we're doing is so important. We don't have a choice but to succeed at it, and to and be at least a little bit optimistic that what we're doing is so important that we can be confident in our success. And we've got some really, really good people working on this. I hope at the end of the day, this is hard news, but I hope at the end of the day we'll all stop and take a minute to just think about the value of what we're trying to do, and to think about some of the good things that are being accomplished, and the positive impacts that we're going to have on students' lives this year, even as we have to struggle with all of these things that are facing us.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Well said. So, Dr. Abdullah, can you bring us to kind of a close on the next steps and where we are and the schedule for the university, and when we can some of these harder decisions?
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to thank all the board for your patience in this. I think one of the things that we realized pretty early is that there are really no easy decisions, and that this road forward is going to be a challenging one. So thank you for understanding. Next steps. We have identified expenditure reductions that we will begin to implement next week. We want to first get the Faculty Senate has said that they've got some proposals. We'd like to get those proposals first. But after we get those proposals, that we'll start the motions to make those reductions starting next week. We will continue to kind of monitor. One of the things that we try to do today, to be extremely realistic, is all of the, we try not to sugarcoat any of the numbers, but there are opportunities for savings, whether it's in testing or whether it's in the cleaning on campus. All of our professionals are doing everything that they can to see what we can do in COVID-related infrastructure to make it so that it can become more manageable. They will continue to do that work to attempt to lower those costs, partially because we know we want to save that money, and partially because we don't know what additional costs may come. And so we will begin to make the difficult decisions next week. If there's a significant change in how the state is moving forward, we will of course come back with another budget update. Or if we see numbers, particularly as it relates to our enrollment, that start to look different, we will come back. In about 2 weeks, one of the big questions that was before the decisions question, of course, was how are we going to prioritize life in the residence halls? We will finalize that early next week and get it out to the students late next week, and then deal with the challenges. We have over 1,600 students who have already paid deposits And so deal with that challenge of deposits and roommates and walk through that. And so the next 2 weeks, we will begin to do those things. In terms of the expenditures that you see, that you saw that we've decided that are important enough for us to move forward, we will begin to make those purchases where we already, again, we've done a lot with the PPE, but in terms of face guards and face shields in classrooms, in terms of additional cleaning supplies, in terms of turning the rooms, we've got to move some beds out of some rooms so that there's only one bed in the room. In terms of going through that, putting the purchase orders in for the Chromebooks, that will all happen post haste. So that all of the expenditures that you saw are expenditures that we are moving forward with simultaneously while we try to bring the costs down on those expenditures. And so we are moving now. We expect to have a lot happen in the next 2 weeks. A web page will go live either today. I wanted to go live today. At the latest, though, it'll be Monday. That will summarize a lot of what we've talked about, flesh out some of the presentation so that students, faculty, staff, alums can view that on the website, and the website will be updated. I have a meeting on Wednesday to talk about the plan that we have to submit to Chev and what the details of that plan will be. We will then get to working to develop that plan. I believe the plan will be due probably early July. I think they'll give us 2 or 3 weeks to do that. And so we'll also begin to work on that plan to make sure we answer any questions also that are in the plan. And so there's a lot in front of us. A lot of it that is unknown. But I would concur with Jay. I think that the challenges that exist in our country have made me understand even more that Virginia State University is a solution. Virginia State University is necessary. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that Virginia State University is here and vibrant.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Crittenden.
Yes, and I would just like to add that we've been discussing the need for the committee, the financial committee, to get together with individuals from the university, and we've talked about it, but it is June, so however it needs to be arranged and set up so that that can go or move forward, I think it needs to be done.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Okay. With that, I don't have anything more. This was an information session. We have the uncertainty of the situation. The uncertainty is clear. And so we expect an update. Dr. Abdullah, keep us posted. We'll move forward. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move, Mr. Rector.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Rector.
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Bye. Y'all stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Be safe, everybody.
Bye now.